The wheels of the wagon cut narrow grooves into the frozen dirt as it made its way over the ridge, the land stretching flat and hard in every direction. The air was cold enough to sting the lungs. Smoke drifted from the chimney of a weather-beaten house in the distance, gray, steady, thin. That was where she was meant to be. Claire Rutledge hadn't spoken in hours, not since sunrise at the rail depot. The driver, a man in his 60s who hadn't asked her name and hadn't offered his, gave her only a glance when he turned the horses down the final bend. Claire's eyes followed the shape of the land as it opened wide before her. The house wasn't large. The barn behind it was crooked at one end, and the fencing was in bad need of repair. There was no garden, no flowers, no woman's touch. Just hard lines, wooden boards weathered by wind and heat and silence. That was fine. She wasn't here to admire anything. She needed a roof, a warm stove, and a place where no one knew her name more than once. She gripped her carpet bag tighter. It was a battered, reddish thing with the stitching worn at the corners and a leather strap that had cracked 2 states back. It held little more than a Bible she no longer opened, 2 dresses, and a pair of good boots she kept wrapped in a flour sack to preserve the soles. She'd slept rough more than once on the way west, eaten less than she ought, and when she looked in a mirror, if there was one, she expected to find a woman who barely resembled the blacksmith's wife she used to be. Her husband, Samuel Rutledge, had drowned in a river swollen by spring thaw 2 years ago. He was trying to get back home from a job in Wellington, horseback too slow, wagon too expensive. Claire had waited 3 nights before anyone told her. Since then, her life had become a series of nights waited out. The wagon slowed. The man on the porch rose from the chair as the horses came to a stop. Nathaniel Harper stood just shy of 6.5 feet, his broad shoulders filling the doorway like a slab of cut timber. He was built like a man who had once lifted far more than cattle feed. His hair was graying at the temples, beard thick but neat. He wore a wool coat that had seen 3 winters too many and carried a Winchester rifle, not slung for show, but because he still used it. Not recently, maybe, but not long ago either. Nathaniel had fought for the Union, served in the 7th Kansas Cavalry, wounded at Wilson's Creek, survived Chickamauga. After the war, he came home and built what he could on land no one else wanted. He married a local girl, Abigail, and they had 6 children in 11 years. She died giving birth to the last one 3 winters ago in the middle of a snowstorm. Since then, Nathaniel had kept the place together by force of will. The ranch barely broke even. The kids were growing up too fast, and he hadn't figured out how to raise them without her. He didn't drink. He didn't run. He just worked and waited. Claire stepped down before the driver could offer help. Her boots hit the dirt hard and sure. She walked straight to the porch. "Claire Rutledge," she said, her voice flat but steady. "You posted the ad?" Nathaniel looked her over once. Not the way some men look at a woman traveling alone, but like a man measuring the distance between one burden and another. "I did," he said. "Name's Harper." "Nathaniel, you'll get your own room. Meals are at dawn and sundown. You'll see to the cooking and what cleaning you're able. I don't expect more than that." Claire nodded. "I'm not here to be talked over or asked about things that don't matter. I'm here to work." He looked her in the eye. "Then we understand each other." He opened the door. Inside, the house was quiet. No one came to greet them. A half-burned log rested in the hearth, barely putting out any heat. The floorboards creaked with every step. Claire noticed boots lined up by the wall, small ones, all different sizes. A girl's coat hanging on a peg with the sleeve torn at the cuff. She didn't stare. She just took it in. Nathaniel motioned to the hallway. "That one's yours. Water pumps behind the barn. If anything leaks, don't bother calling. It all leaks. You hungry?" Claire shook her head. Later, she walked into the kitchen. It was a mess. Dust in the corners, stove left dirty, a drawer broken and hanging loose. The pantry was stocked, but barely. Flour, beans, some salt pork. She recognized the kind of household this was immediately. Too many mouths, not enough hours. There was no woman's touch anywhere. Just absence. She didn't ask where the children were. She assumed they were upstairs or out in the back acreage. But someone had peeled a potato and left it half-cut on the windowsill, drying in the open air. A child's effort. Claire rolled up her sleeves and opened the stove. She didn't ask where the matches were. She found them. She didn't complain about the soot or the cracked skillet. She cleaned as she moved, hands remembering the rhythm without needing instruction. For the first time in a long while, she felt something close to order. By nightfall, the scent of food filled the house. Salt pork and beans with dried thyme she found buried behind a tin of lard. She baked rough biscuits, not soft or pretty, but warm and hot through. She put the plates out on the table and waited. One by one, the children appeared. A girl, maybe 12, came first. Her hands were raw from work. Her eyes landed on Claire, and she said nothing. Behind her came a boy nearly her height, 13, maybe 14, followed by two younger boys with identical serious faces, a quiet girl who couldn't be more than 6, and a small boy who clung to the frame of the doorway and didn't speak or blink. They sat where they always sat, used to routine, used to filling plates without laughter or chatter. Claire served them in silence, watching their movements. She noted how the eldest boy watched over the rest with too much worry in his jaw, how the youngest girl reached for her spoon with 2 hands, how none of them looked at Nathaniel when he entered the room and stood with his cup of coffee by the door. Claire didn't speak unless asked. No one asked anything. But all 6 children finished their plates, every last bite. Later, when the dishes were done and the fire poked back to life, Claire stood by the window in her small room and stared out toward the barn, watching the wind push against the loose boards. She didn't know how long this job would last. She didn't know if she could carry another family's burden after nearly drowning in her own. But this was a place that had stopped moving, just like her. And that, for now, was enough. The next morning came early, as mornings always did on land that didn't care whether a soul was tired or grieving. A knock never came. The sounds of boots on floorboards, the scrape of a chair, the thud of a pail against the porch. Those were the things that pulled Claire from sleep. She dressed quickly, tied her hair in a knot, and stepped into the hallway. No one was waiting for her. No one needed to be. The house already moved without her. In the kitchen, the stove was cold again. She knelt, opened it, and added kindling until the flames caught. The air smelled of smoke and iron. She worked with her hands without thinking, poured water into the pot, sliced what little meat she had left, stirred cornmeal into batter. When she heard the soft creak of footsteps behind her, she didn't turn. "You're up early," came Nathaniel's voice, low and direct. "So are you." He leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, watching the way she moved. Not judging, just observing. Claire kept her eyes on the skillet, flipping the first piece of fried pork. "Children want coffee," he said. "I figured. You sleep all right?" "Well enough." That was all they said. He waited another moment, then walked out the back door. The screen slammed shut behind him. One by one, the children came down. Today they spoke even less than last night. The eldest, Daniel, as Claire learned from the way the others deferred to him, nodded once when she handed him his plate. The girl, Anna, took her biscuit and sat by the window, eyes on the yard. The younger boys, Luke and Jonah, ate fast, never looking up. The little girl, Ellie, waited for Claire to sit beside her before touching her food. The smallest boy, the one who hadn't spoken, came in last. He stood just inside the doorway, same place as last night. Same blank stare. Claire crouched slowly. "You hungry, sweetheart?" He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched her. Anna spoke without looking up. "That's Ben." Claire turned her head slightly. "He doesn't talk?" "No," Daniel answered. "Not since Mama." Claire nodded once. She didn't press. Ben stood there another minute, then walked to the table, sat down, and ate in silence. They had all lost someone, she realized. And not long ago. The grief hadn't gone stale yet. It still shaped their days. Their silences weren't discipline, they were scars. After breakfast, Claire washed the plates while the children left one by one. Anna took Ellie by the hand and went outside, probably to tend to the hens. The boys headed toward the barn. Nathaniel passed through the kitchen once to grab a tool belt, said nothing, and left again. Claire found herself alone for the first time since arriving. She used that time to examine the house. Not with judgment, just a practical eye. The pantry was too low stock for a house of this size. The woodpile needed replenishing. The spare linens were clean but thin. She opened a drawer in the parlor and found unpaid bills. She opened another and found a single photograph, Nathaniel with Abigail, seated together in front of the house. Abigail was smiling. He wasn't. Even then, Claire shut the drawer gently and returned to the kitchen. By midday, she had cleaned the pantry shelves, boiled the kitchen rags, and re-sewn the torn cuff of Anna's coat. She moved with purpose. It wasn't about making the house perfect. It was about not standing still. Standing still was when the thoughts came. That afternoon, while peeling potatoes on the back steps, Claire saw Daniel carrying a busted saddle. He wasn't strong enough to lift it the right way, so he dragged it through the dirt. She set the knife down. "You'll wear the leather raw like that." Daniel stopped. "Ain't got much choice." She stood. "You do if someone helps you." He stared at her like he didn't understand the offer. Then he stepped aside. She knelt, picked up the saddle properly, and helped carry it toward the barn. Inside, the barn was half-shadowed, warm with the smell of hay and animals. A horse stood in one of the stalls, chewing slowly. The floor had straw scattered all over, and tools lay where someone had dropped them. "Is that your horse?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "His name's Cooper. Pa brought him back from a cattle drive out near Dodge." She looked the animal over. Cooper had good legs, but a nicked ear and a dull coat. "He needs brushing. Don't always have time." "You do now," she said simply. Daniel looked at her again, longer this time, as if trying to decide if she was just being kind or if she meant it. He didn't answer, just picked up the brush. Later that evening, while Ellie played with a cracked doll by the fire and Ben sat quietly on the floor, Claire sat beside the window and began mending a pair of pants too long for her to wear, but clearly meant for Luke. Nathaniel stepped in from the cold, dust on his shoulders, his gloves tucked into his belt. He didn't speak until he poured coffee into the tin cup he always used. "You find everything you need?" "For now." "You plan on staying?" Claire looked up from her stitching. "Depends." "On what?" "If this place holds." He nodded. "It holds. Then I'll stay." And with that, the day ended the same way it began, in silence, but not the kind that pushes people apart. It was the kind that gave them space. Claire hadn't come looking for family. Nathaniel hadn't come looking for anyone at all. But now, in the quiet of that small house, something unspoken had begun to settle in the air between them. Not hope, not yet, but maybe the first shape of it. And though no one said it out loud, something had shifted. The children had eaten every meal. The stove had stayed warm. No one asked where she'd come from, and no one asked when she planned to leave. For now, she was just there, and that was more than she'd had in a long, long time. The next few days settled into a quiet rhythm, not comfortable yet, but steady enough to hold. Claire rose before the sun, lit the stove with hands that no longer hesitated, and worked through the house with the calm focus of someone who'd lived too long in uncertainty to waste time on anything but usefulness. The children were still cautious, but something had shifted just slightly. Anna brought in eggs without being asked. Luke and Jonah began stacking kindling on their own. Even Ben, still mute, started sitting closer to the hearth when Claire was near. He didn't speak, but when she handed him a slice of warm bread, he didn't look away. It was Nathaniel who remained unchanged, or seemed to. He came and went with the sun, worked long hours in the field or barn, and only spoke when something needed doing. He never asked Claire anything personal, never pried into where she came from, who she used to be, or what had made her eyes go so still. That unspoken space between them wasn't unfriendly, it was measured. Like they both understood how fragile certain kinds of trust could be if pushed too soon. But trust builds in small, unnoticed ways. And on the fourth morning, when Claire opened the pantry, she saw 3 sacks of flour, a fresh wheel of cheese, and a slab of smoked meat. Supplies she hadn't requested. Supplies that hadn't been there the day before. She closed the door gently and turned back to the stove. Nathaniel didn't say a word about it. Neither did she. That afternoon, while the boys were out mending fence posts and the girls hung damp laundry on the line, Claire sat with Ben on the back steps. He was drawing with a stick in the dirt, circles, then a house, then what looked like a horse. He never made a sound. Claire didn't ask him to, but she watched quietly, and when he paused to look at her, she smiled once. "You like horses?" she asked. He nodded. "You got a favorite?" He scratched another shape beside the horse. Maybe a dog, maybe just a blob. She waited. Then, almost too quiet to catch, he whispered Cooper. Claire didn't react right away. She looked back at the horizon, gave him time. When she spoke again, it was steady. That's a fine name. Ben nodded again, but slower this time. Then he drew a figure beside the horse, a stick woman with a long skirt. Claire didn't ask who it was. She already knew. Later that evening, the air turned colder. Nathaniel came in with mud on his boots and a slight limp in his right leg, something she hadn't noticed until now. He tried not to favor it, but after a long day on foot, it showed. Claire handed him a towel without a word. He took it, met her eyes. "You seen Daniel?" "Out by the creek, with Luke. Said they'd be back before dark." Nathaniel looked toward the window. "It's past that now." "I'll go check," Claire said. "You don't need to." "I said I'll go." She pulled on her shawl and stepped outside, without waiting for a reply. The wind had picked up, and dust came fast across the land. Claire followed the trail down the slope, her boots pressing firm into the soil. She scanned the trees along the edge of the property until she saw movement. Two boys crouched near the creek bed, arguing over a trap that had snapped empty. "Daniel," she called out. "Time to come in." He looked up, startled. "Did Pa send you?" "No. I came because it's cold and you're both late." Luke stood quickly. "We were just checking traps." Claire walked closer. "You catch anything?" Daniel scowled. "Nothing but a busted snare." She crouched beside them. "You tying them the way I showed you?" Daniel hesitated. "Sort of." Claire gave him a look. "You do it right, or you don't do it at all." He looked down, embarrassed. "I know." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not hard, just steady. Then let's get inside before the frost bites through." Back at the house, Nathaniel had set out mugs with hot cider. Claire didn't say anything when she noticed. She just poured two for the boys and left them on the table. That night, after the children had gone to bed and the fire was low, Claire stood by the sink, drying the last of the spoons. Nathaniel stepped into the kitchen, quieter than usual. "You didn't need to go after them," he said. She set the spoon down. "If they were mine, I'd want someone to." He didn't respond right away. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, same way he had the day she arrived. But his eyes were softer now. "You have any?" She shook her head. "We tried. Years ago. Samuel and I. Didn't happen." Nathaniel looked at the floor. "Sorry." Claire folded the towel. "Don't be. I stopped wanting what I couldn't have." He shifted his stance. "Still, I reckon I owe you for what you're doing. I didn't come here for charity or thanks." "I know." Claire looked at him then, truly looked. His shoulders were tired, face older than his years, eyes still carrying the weight of something that hadn't been let go. She didn't ask what it was. She had her own. "You don't have to say it," she said finally. "Just let me stay." He nodded once. "You're here, Claire. That's enough." And with that, he walked back into the quiet hall and shut the door behind him. The house settled again. No one had spoken of the past. But for the first time since arriving, Claire felt she wasn't just filling space. She was being counted. Morning brought wind and gray light through the kitchen windows. The sky looked heavy with the promise of rain, maybe more. Claire cracked the window just enough to let out the smell of burnt grease. She'd overcooked the first batch of biscuits. She muttered under her breath and started again, fingers moving quick through the flour. Her body had adjusted to the early hours, but her sleep still broke in the middle of the night, the way it always had after Samuel died. She rarely dreamed, and when she did, she didn't speak of it. By the time the children came down, the table was full, boiled eggs, bread still warm, butter she'd churned yesterday. They ate like they always did, in silence, heads low, eyes alert. But that morning, Anna stayed standing by the door, arms crossed, chin raised just slightly. Claire looked up from the stove. "You not hungry?" Anna didn't answer. Her shoulders were tense, jaw tight. "You sleep all right?" Claire asked, tone even. Anna stepped forward slowly, her boots barely making a sound. "You don't need to tell Daniel what to do." Claire wiped her hands on a cloth. The room quieted instantly. "I asked him if he tied a snare right. That's all." "You made him feel stupid," Anna said. Claire stepped closer to the table, careful not to raise her voice. "That wasn't my aim." "You ain't our mother," Anna muttered, barely above a whisper. No, Claire said plainly. I'm not. Anna's eyes filled, but she held her ground. We don't need another woman coming in here pretending she knows what we need. Daniel lowered his head, clearly uncomfortable. Luke and Jonah stopped chewing. Ellie looked between them all like she might cry. Ben didn't move. Claire stepped forward, voice steady. I don't pretend anything. I cook, I clean, and I keep you all from freezing. That's what I came here to do. If that's too much, tell your father. He won't listen, Anna said. He never does. Claire paused. There was no anger in Anna's voice, only something deeper. Something Claire recognized. It wasn't about her. It was about the way grief settles like stone in the walls of a home and makes everything feel heavier. She softened. Anna, you've done a fine job holding this house together. I can see it in every corner. But you're still a girl. You shouldn't have to carry it alone. Anna blinked quickly, but her arms stayed crossed. I'm not asking for help. Claire nodded. Then we'll just work side by side. Nothing more. Anna didn't reply. She took her plate and sat down back stiff. But she ate every bite. Later that day, after the dishes were done and the house was quiet again, Nathaniel returned from town earlier than usual. His horse was wet from the rain, and he looked annoyed. Claire met him at the door with a towel. You all right? She asked. Postmaster gave me hell about some overdue shipment. Feed's late. Prices re-up. Same story. He didn't say much more until supper, when the children had all gone quiet again and the storm rolled loud against the window glass. Your name came up in town, he said suddenly, looking at Claire. She didn't flinch. I figured it might. They said you came from Sedgwick. I did. Woman at the mercantile said there was trouble. Some kind of incident. Claire set her fork down. A man I work for tried to keep my pay. I left before it got worse. Nathaniel stared at her for a long moment. He come looking? Not yet. He nodded. If he does, he'll have to get through me. Claire didn't answer. She picked her fork back up and finished her stew. That night, the fire burned low and slow. Anna came into the kitchen without being asked and started peeling potatoes for the next morning. Claire didn't comment, just handed her the sharper knife. Do you miss your husband? Anna asked suddenly. Claire hesitated. Every day. Anna's hand slowed. Were you happy? Claire thought carefully. Some days, yes. Others, we worked hard just to survive. But we had respect. That was enough. Anna looked at her, unsure whether to believe it. Claire added, it wasn't perfect, but it was honest. A long silence passed between them. Pa used to laugh, Anna whispered. Before Mama passed. Claire nodded, stirring the pot. He will again. Not soon, but he will. Anna didn't say anything after that, but she stayed until the potatoes were done. That same evening, Nathaniel walked out to the barn alone, as he did most nights. Claire watched him from the window, saw the way he moved, measured, cautious, still carrying that limp from his war injury. She realized then that he'd never once spoken of the battles he'd fought. Not to her, not to the children. The silence wasn't just habit, it was armor. And yet, the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, it wasn't indifference. It was restraint. Back in her room, Claire sat at the edge of the bed, wrapping her shawl tighter as the wind picked up outside. The storm was heavier than she expected. She could hear the barn doors straining against their hinges. A part of her still waited for the past to come knocking, for someone to demand she leave, or for this temporary quiet to shatter. But she stayed seated. She listened to the house breathing around her. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh through the chimney, every distant shuffle from the children's rooms told her the same thing. She was still here, and for now, they were letting her be part of something that might one day feel like a home. The storm passed during the night, but left the land soaked and heavy with mud. Water pooled near the barn where the ground dipped, and the front gate sagged further on its hinges, nearly dragging in the dirt. Claire stood on the porch early that morning with her sleeves rolled and boots already slicked in mud. She held a shovel in one hand and a quiet sense of purpose in the other. The ranch wasn't beautiful, but she'd started to feel protective of it, like something bruised but still breathing. Inside, the children were slower to rise. Even they could feel the weight of the storm that had passed, the kind that didn't just soak the ground but stirred up whatever lay beneath it. Nathaniel had already gone out by the time Claire set breakfast. He hadn't said where he was headed, only that he'd be back before dusk. She didn't press, but she did watch the road for longer than usual after he left. By mid-morning, Claire was sweeping out the kitchen when she heard footsteps on the porch, heavier than a child's, boots worn, deliberate. She opened the door with a steady hand and found herself face to face with a man she didn't recognize. He was thin, wiry, the kind of man who smiled without warmth. His clothes were travel-worn, his hat pulled low. He held his posture like someone who'd spent time talking himself into being more than he was. "You Claire Rutledge?" he asked. Her hands tensed around the doorframe. "Who's asking?" "Name's Harold Finn. We met back in Sedgwick. You work for my cousin, Elias." She said nothing. He smiled again, smaller this time. "He says you left him high and dry. Took wages you hadn't earned." Claire didn't blink. "He put his hands on me. That changes what was owed." Finn stepped closer. "Still a debt, far as he sees it. And I got reason to believe you're making a nice home here. Figured it's time to square things." Claire looked past him, scanning the trees. The children were still inside. Anna and the boys were reading near the stove. Ben was coloring. Ellie was humming something soft. She couldn't let them hear any of this. "You got 5 seconds to step off this porch," she said flatly. Finn raised his hands. "Now, no need to—" 4. His eyes narrowed. "You got a man here now? One who'll talk for you." 3. He stepped back, but didn't turn. "Elias don't forget, Claire. And he sure don't forgive. Just remember that." He walked off down the path with slow, pointed steps, glancing back once before he disappeared into the trees where his horse was likely tied. Claire shut the door, slid the bolt in place, and stood there for a long moment, hands shaking only after it was over. She'd left that life behind. She thought distance would keep it buried. But Kansas wasn't far enough. And she knew, deep down, it was only a matter of time before it came to a head. That night, when Nathaniel returned, she didn't mention the visitor right away. He looked tired, dirt on his collar, eyes red from wind. He dropped his gloves on the counter and poured water from the basin to wash. "Something happened while I was gone?" he asked. Claire paused. "A man came. Said he knew me from Sedgwick. Asked for money." Nathaniel straightened. "You give him any?" "No." "You tell him to leave?" I counted to 3. He cracked a tired, crooked smile, then sobered. "He give a name?" "Harold Finn. Claimed he's kin to Elias." Nathaniel looked away, jaw tense. "That man a danger?" "Elias is the kind that holds on to a grudge because it's the only power he's got left. I don't know what Finn is, but if one showed up, the other's not far behind." Nathaniel wiped his hands and leaned on the counter. "Next time you see him, you call for me. Don't handle that alone." Claire met his eyes. "I've been handling things alone for a long time." "I know," he said quietly, "but you're not alone here." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was honest. Later that night, after supper, Claire found herself in the barn. The children had gone to bed early. The sky was clear for the first time in days, and the air held that stillness that came only after a storm. She brushed Cooper slowly, her hands moving in a rhythm that quieted her thoughts. Nathaniel stepped in a few minutes later, limping slightly, rubbing his shoulder. She could tell by the way he moved that the injury from the war still flared up when it rained. "You should sit," she said. "That leg's talking." "It always does," he replied. She didn't ask how he got hurt, but this time he offered it. Bullet went through just above the knee. Shattered the bone. Doctor said I'd never walk again. I proved him wrong, but never did get back to straight. "Did it happen in Georgia?" she asked. He nodded. "Chickamauga. We were outnumbered. Didn't matter. We held the line. A lot of good men didn't come home." Claire was quiet. Then she said, "My husband never made it home either. Not from a war. From a river crossing. He worked too hard trying to keep us afloat. Never learned when to say enough." Nathaniel looked down at his hands. "Sometimes I wonder if I stayed in the war too long just to avoid home. And now I'm here, and it still don't feel real some days." Claire met his gaze. "It's real enough." The barn was quiet except for the breath of the horses. Outside, wind rustled the dry grass. Inside, 2 people stood side by side, saying things they hadn't said to anyone else in years. "I'll fix that gate tomorrow," she said finally. "The one near the road. I'll help." She nodded. You always do. The following week began with silence, heavier than usual. Not the kind that settled comfortably between people, but the kind that lingered after something unspoken had been felt too strongly to ignore. Nathaniel had barely spoken since Claire told him about Finn. He watched the road more often now, checked the gate after sundown, kept his rifle closer to the door than before. Claire noticed, but she didn't bring it up. He was protecting them the way he knew how, by staying ready. The children, too, felt the shift. They were quieter at breakfast, more obedient during chores. But beneath it all, Claire could sense the tension building, particularly in Daniel. He'd grown more withdrawn. There was something in the way he looked at Nathaniel now, a kind of pressure, like he was waiting for something that never came. It finally came to a head late one afternoon, when Nathaniel and Daniel returned from the south field after repairing a section of fence. Claire had just finished folding the laundry when she heard the barn door slam and Daniel's raised voice crack through the wind. You could have told me, he said, storming past the porch where Claire stood. Told you what? Nathaniel asked, stepping after him with a hard edge in his tone. That someone's coming here. That some man's looking for her and might come for us. Claire stepped down from the porch. Daniel stopped near the well, fists clenched, face flushed red from anger and effort. You think I can't handle knowing? Daniel said. You think we're still little? I'm the one fixing fence posts while you limp behind me. I'm the one who watches Anna every time she steps outside alone. If something's coming, I deserve to know. Nathaniel didn't yell. He stood still for a long moment, then spoke low. It's not your job to protect this family. Daniel's jaw tightened. It was when you stopped looking anyone in the eye after Mama died. Nathaniel looked like he'd been slapped, but he didn't deny it. Claire stepped forward. That man who came, he's trouble, but I didn't want it to fall on you. Daniel looked at her now, a different kind of fire in his eyes. You brought it here. Claire swallowed, steady but honest. I did, and I'll face it if it comes. I won't run, but I won't let you carry it, Daniel. You're still a boy. He stepped back. I'm not. Not anymore. And with that, he turned and walked toward the tree line, not waiting for permission. Later that evening, Claire found Anna brushing Ellie's hair by the fire. The tension hadn't faded. It had just shifted. Anna glanced up once, then looked away. You're not going to last here, she said quietly. Men like that don't let go. Claire took a breath and sat across from her. I'm not planning on running. You should, Anna said. You stay, and we all pay for what happened to you. Claire let the words sit in the air a moment before responding. Your father hired me because this house needed a woman who wouldn't break at the first gust of wind. That's not why he keeps you here, Anna replied. He watches you like he used to watch her. Claire's face didn't change. I'm not here to replace your mother. No, Anna said, but he's starting to forget her. I can see it. Claire leaned forward slightly. Do you hate me for it? Anna's eyes flicked up. I don't know. Some days I think I do. Claire didn't flinch. That's fair, but I'm still not going anywhere. They stared at each other for a long time. Not as rivals, but as two women who knew what it meant to hold too much too young. After a while, Anna looked back down and began braiding Ellie's hair again, slower this time. That night, Nathaniel sat outside on the porch. Claire brought him coffee and sat beside him without speaking. The stars were out, clear, crisp. The kind of night that made the prairie look endless. You blame me for not telling Daniel sooner? He asked. I don't blame you, Claire said, but I understand why he's angry. Nathaniel took a slow sip. I don't know how to raise boys to be men without asking too much too soon. Maybe you don't have to raise them all the way. Maybe you just have to stand close enough so they know they're not alone. He nodded once. It's harder than war, this part. They sat in silence after that. Neither of them moved, but they didn't need to. The porch light glowed behind them. The house stood still but strong. And inside, 6 children slept under one roof, each shaped by loss, each learning to trust a little more, even if they didn't say it. The next morning came cold and bright. As Claire poured coffee and salted the eggs, she saw Daniel walk in from the field before sunrise, his boots soaked, hair damp with morning fog. He didn't say anything, just handed her a pile of chopped wood and nodded once before stepping inside. A small gesture, but it said more than words ever could. The next days passed without incident, but nobody relaxed. The silence around the house had changed, no longer born of grief, but of alertness. Every door was shut with care, every movement more deliberate. Claire noticed that Nathaniel kept his rifle closer now, leaned just inside the kitchen corner while he worked outside. Daniel checked the barn twice each night. Even Ben started watching the front road more than usual, quietly lingering near the windows when he thought no one noticed. Claire didn't show her worry, but it lived just beneath her ribs. She took to walking the edge of the property each afternoon, watching for prints that didn't belong, for signs of a campfire in the distance. Most days, she found nothing, until one didn't feel like most days. It was mid-morning when she heard it. Metal on wood, faint, irregular. She was hanging laundry out back when the sound reached her. Not the usual rustle of wind or the creak of the chicken coop. It came from near the fence line, east side, where the woods ran tighter and visibility dropped. Claire wiped her hands on her apron and stepped carefully into the tree line. She followed the sound with quiet steps, moving past the last of the cleared brush and into the narrow path that led toward the creek. As she rounded a bend, she froze. There, crouched near the edge of the fence, was Harold Finn. He was pulling something from his saddlebag, a bottle, maybe whiskey. He hadn't seen her yet. Claire raised her voice low and sharp. "You lost." Finn turned, startled but smiling when he saw her. "Well now, I was beginning to wonder if you'd come looking. You're trespassing." "I was just admiring the view," he said, standing slowly. "Didn't know you were the kind to keep watch." Claire didn't move. "I told you before, you're not welcome here." Finn stepped forward, boots crunching over leaves. "See, the thing is Elias still believes you owe him. And I'm inclined to agree. You left a bad situation. Fine, but you left with things that weren't yours. He's asking for what's due." Claire narrowed her eyes. "He laid hands on me. That cancels all debts." Finn chuckled. "Out here, Claire, the law is what a man can enforce. Elias knows that. And so do I." Before she could respond, Nathaniel's voice cut through the woods like a gunshot. "You should leave." Claire didn't turn, but she felt relief pulse through her when she heard it. Nathaniel stepped forward, shotgun in hand, calm but not unsure. Finn raised both hands. "Ain't looking for trouble, Harper. Just a conversation. This is my land. You're armed and uninvited. That makes it more than a conversation." Finn hesitated, then spat in the dirt and backed toward his horse. "Elias won't stop. You know that, right? Women like her don't get to just disappear." Nathaniel didn't move. "She didn't disappear. She walked away." Finn mounted his horse. "Then maybe she better keep walking." With that, he turned and rode off, dust rising behind him as he disappeared over the far ridge. Nathaniel lowered the shotgun, but didn't look away from the trail for a long moment. Claire stood beside him, arms tight around herself. "I didn't want it to come here," she said quietly. "I know," he said, "but now it has." They walked back to the house without speaking. Claire went straight to the kitchen. Her hands moved on instinct, chopping, boiling, kneading, but her thoughts ran wild. She had known Elias wouldn't let things rest, but the sight of Finn near the fence had made it real. It wasn't just her past anymore. It was the children's safety, Nathaniel's land, the fragile peace they'd built together. That evening, Nathaniel gathered the children after supper. No pretense, no excuses. "There was a man near the fence today," he said, standing near the fire. "He came asking for Miss Claire. He won't be back soon, but he might return." The children were silent. Anna looked at Claire. Daniel didn't blink. "I want you all to understand something," Nathaniel continued. "She's part of this house now. Same as any of you. If someone threatens her, they threaten this family." Daniel sat up straighter. "What do we do?" "You stay near the house," Nathaniel said. "You listen. You speak up if you see anything. But you let me handle the rest." Anna folded her arms. She said, "He hurt her. The one from Sedgwick." Claire met her gaze. "Yes." Anna nodded once. "Then he deserves what's coming." Ben looked at Claire, then walked to her and sat beside her without saying a word. She rested her hand gently on his. That night, Claire stood in the doorway of the barn, watching the moon rise over the hills. Nathaniel joined her, his shoulder brushing hers. "You meant what you said?" she asked. I don't speak unless I mean it. Claire looked down. This could get worse. He could come back with more. Nathaniel nodded. Then we'll be ready. You've got 6 children. A house to keep. You don't need my trouble. He turned to her then, eyes steady. Trouble or not, you walked in when we were all barely holding together. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't push. You stayed. That counts. She said nothing, but her throat tightened in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. You're not a guest anymore, he added. This is your home, too. For the first time since Sedgwick, since Missouri, even Claire believed it. The days that followed settled into a tense stillness, the kind that presses on the chest without breaking it. Nothing stirred at the fence line, and no more strangers came down the road, but the feeling of being watched hadn't left. Claire kept her back to walls when she worked, kept an oil lamp burning later than usual. Nathaniel doubled the watch on the barn and moved his shotgun from the kitchen corner to beside his bed. But they didn't stop living. That was the choice. Keep moving, but let the fear rot everything from the inside. It was on a Sunday, after morning chores, when the quiet finally cracked. Claire just brought out fresh cornbread, the scent still thick in the house, when Daniel ran in from the yard, breath sharp, boots wet with morning dew. There's 2 riders coming from the South Road, he said, both armed. One looks like the man from before. Nathaniel was already standing. He took the shotgun from the rack and checked it quickly, then passed Claire a revolver she hadn't known he kept in the drawer. She stared at it, then took it without a word. You stay inside, he told the children. No, Daniel said, stepping forward. We stay near the house, like you said, but we stand ready. Nathaniel didn't argue. Claire followed him to the porch. The 2 men were just coming into view now, slow and steady. Harold Finn and someone bigger, meaner looking, eyes narrow beneath a bowler hat. Elias. Claire felt her stomach turn. That face hadn't changed. The same permanent sneer. The same walk, wide, like he expected the ground to move for him. The horses stopped 10 yards from the porch. Elias didn't dismount. Claire, he said, voice too smooth. Long way from Sedgwick, ain't you? Nathaniel didn't lower the shotgun. She's not talking to you. Elias smiled. You must be the cattleman. Heard you were the kind that liked to take in strays. Nathaniel's voice was flat. You came to collect something? Elias looked past him, eyes scanning the windows. She owes me months of pay. Left in the middle of the season. Took coin from the till. Left a mess behind her. Claire stepped beside Nathaniel, slow and firm. I left bruises behind me. That's what I left. Elias laughed. You always were dramatic. Nathaniel didn't move. You got any proof of that claim? Elias leaned forward in his saddle. I got a mouth and a memory. That's enough for most. Not for me. Elias looked down. Then maybe we work something out. She comes with me. I call even. Nathaniel took a step forward. You take one more breath on this land, and it'll be your last. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind stopped. Claire spoke. You don't own me, Elias. You never did. You thought because I was small and had no family, you could treat me like livestock. But I don't belong to anyone now. Elias studied her. You think this man'll protect you? Think these kids will stand between you and what you've got coming? Claire looked past him toward the house. The curtain moved slightly. Someone, probably Anna, was watching. I don't need anyone to stand for me, she said. But they already are. And that's something you'll never have again. Finn shifted in his saddle, clearly growing uncomfortable. Come on, Elias. This ain't worth it. Elias spat. She's not worth it, you mean? Nathaniel raised the barrel. That's far enough. There was a long pause. Then Elias tugged the reins. Enjoy your little fantasy, he said, turning the horse. Winter's coming. We'll see how long she lasts when things get tight. He rode off without another word. Finn followed, glancing back once with something that might have been regret. Nathaniel lowered the shotgun. Claire didn't move. You all right? He asked. She nodded. Not afraid. Just tired of men like him thinking I should be. Back inside, the children had gathered in the main room. Claire stepped in and saw them. Daniel with his shoulders squared. Anna standing close to Ellie, been clutching the same wooden horse he'd carved last month. I'm sorry that came to your door, Claire said, but I'm not leaving, and I won't let him take anything from us. Daniel stepped forward first. If it doesn't scare us. Anna nodded. He tried to make you look small, but he looked small. Ben didn't say anything, but he came up and wrapped his arms around Claire's waist. For the first time since she arrived, Claire felt something shift, not just in the house, but in her own chest. She hadn't just been accepted. She had been claimed. That evening, Nathaniel came to her room. He stood at the doorway, hat in hand. "I'd understand if you want to leave," he said. "After today." "I won't." He nodded once. "They trust you. I trust you. That's not something I give lightly." "I know," she said. Then he added, quieter, "I don't want you here just for them." Claire didn't look away. "Then what do you want?" "I want you here because you want to be." She stepped toward him. "I do." He didn't say anything after that. He didn't need to. Outside, the prairie was quiet again. But this time, the silence didn't feel like waiting. It felt like something held firm, earned, defended, and kept. The morning after Elias rode off, the Harper Ranch stood still. The kind of stillness that comes not from fear, but from something being settled, even if no one said it aloud. Claire stood at the stove, stirring a pot of oats, and for the first time in months, her hands didn't shake. She hadn't slept much, but the exhaustion was different. It was honest, earned. The kind that came after standing your ground. Nathaniel entered through the back door, boots wet from checking the south fence. He didn't say much, just nodded once at Claire and poured himself a cup of coffee. But something in his shoulders had changed. He wasn't braced for impact anymore. Claire broke the silence. "You think he'll come back?" "No," Nathaniel said. "Not without consequence." She nodded. "Then that's done." He looked at her. Almost. The children filtered in slowly. Daniel sat next to Jonah and handed him a sharpened pencil without a word. Anna helped Ellie with her shoes. Ben ate quietly but closer to Claire than usual. No one mentioned the day before, but the way they stayed in the same room longer than necessary, the way they lingered after eating, told its own story. After breakfast, Claire walked the yard, checking the laundry line and picking up fallen clothespins. The breeze was cold. Winter wouldn't wait much longer, but her steps were light. For the first time since arriving, she didn't feel like a visitor. In the barn, she found Daniel tending to Cooper. He looked older now, even if only by weeks. His movements were more certain. The boy had changed, and she knew she had too. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked suddenly, brushing down the horse's flank. "I did," she said honestly. "More than once." "What stopped you?" Claire leaned against the stall. "One morning I looked around and realized I didn't feel like a stranger anymore." "That's rare." Daniel nodded, his hands slowing. "I guess I stopped waiting for you to leave." Claire met his eyes. "I stopped waiting too." Later that day, Nathaniel asked Claire to walk with him to the north field, where a few fence posts had gone soft after the rain. They didn't speak much as they walked, but the quiet wasn't uncomfortable. There was no more tension in it. As they reached the far end of the property, Nathaniel paused beside a cedar post and leaned on it with his bad leg. "You said something the other night about not belonging to anyone." Claire waited. He looked at her, steady. "That's a good thing. But I've been thinking, maybe there's another kind of belonging. Not one that takes, but one that stays. One that's earned." She looked at him. "You mean family?" He nodded. "If you still want to be here, Claire, I think it's time we stop pretending you're just passing through." Claire let that settle. "You sure?" Nathaniel didn't flinch. "The house feels right when you're in it. I haven't been able to say that since Abigail passed." Claire breathed out slowly. "Then I'll stay. Not as help, not as charity, but as myself." He nodded once, and that was all it took. That evening, she found herself seated beside Anna at the sewing table. Anna was mending a button on one of Jonah's shirts and struggling with the thread. "You looped it wrong," Claire said, gently guiding her fingers. "Start from underneath." Anna didn't pull away. "Thanks." A pause passed, then Anna asked, "You ever think about having your own?" Claire looked up. "Children, I mean." Claire hesitated. "We tried, Samuel and I. It never happened." Anna was quiet for a moment. "You act like a mother." Claire gave a small smile. "Sometimes I feel like one, especially here." "You are one," Anna said simply. "At least to us." Claire's throat tightened, but she said nothing. She just kept sewing. That night, Nathaniel sat outside again, pipe in hand, eyes on the horizon. Claire stepped out and joined him. I told Anna the truth about not being able to have children. Nathaniel looked at her. How'd she take it? She told me I already was one. To them. Nathaniel smiled. She's right. Claire took a breath. I don't want the past to hang over this house forever. If we're going to be something, it needs to be by choice. Not because we're scared of being alone. He nodded. Then let's choose it. And there, under the night sky and the quiet sound of wind moving through the trees, they made that choice, without a proposal, without a promise spoken out loud. Just a decision, steady and strong. The next morning, Claire braided Ellie's hair while Luke and Jonah cleaned their boots at the steps. Daniel chopped firewood without being asked. Ben carved quietly near the fireplace, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Something had shifted. What began as survival had become something else. Claire was no longer just the widow who answered job ad. She was the woman they waited for when she was late, returning from town. The voice they listened to when supper was ready. The presence that filled the quiet corners of a house that had forgotten what warmth felt like. And Nathaniel Harper, who had once believed his best years were buried under war, loss, and silence, was beginning to believe again. In the future, in the chance to love without fear, to stay without apology. The first snowfall came early that year. It arrived quietly one morning, dusting the roof of the Harper house in white, covering the pasture in a thin, clean layer that softened the edges of everything. The land looked hushed, like it was holding its breath. Claire stood at the window, holding a cup of coffee close to her chest, watching the flakes settle against the window pane. It had been nearly a year since she'd stepped off the wagon and into the unknown. Back then, she hadn't expected to stay more than a season. She hadn't expected warmth, or welcome, or a second chance. But the house, the land, and the people in it, especially the quiet man with eyes like the last light before sundown, had changed all that. Nathaniel stepped in behind her, his hands rough and cold from the morning woodpile. He leaned slightly closer, enough that she felt the weight of his presence before she heard him speak. Snow'll hold through the week. Claire nodded. I'll bring in the extra quilts. He looked at her with a small smile, the kind he only ever gave when no one else was looking. It's been a hard year, but a whole one, she replied. A quiet knock came from the front door. Nathaniel stepped forward, opened it, and found the county clerk standing on the porch, coat buttoned up to the neck, papers in hand. Claire recognized the man, thin, middle-aged, polite, but always in a hurry. He'd been out once before when Nathaniel filed for new grazing rights. Mr. Harper, he said, nodding. Nathaniel glanced at the papers. That them, the clerk handed them over, finalized and signed. All official. Nathaniel nodded, stepped aside. Appreciate it. Once the door was closed, Nathaniel handed the papers to Claire. She read the top line aloud. Application for legal guardianship and family registry. Claire Harper. She looked up, startled. Nathaniel met her gaze with calm certainty. It's not about changing your name. It's about making what's already real, official. Claire blinked slowly, breath catching. You didn't ask. I didn't need to, he said. You're already their mother. And you've been more of a partner than I ever had any right to expect. This just puts it down in ink. Claire didn't answer at first. She just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, holding on for longer than she ever had before. No words, just the quiet sound of snow against the windows and the low creak of old wood settling. By evening, the house was warm with stew on the stove and the children gathered around the hearth. Anna and Daniel had taken charge of decorating the table with cut pine and bits of red cloth. Ellie helped tie ribbons onto the backs of the chairs. Ben had carved a tiny figure of Claire and placed it next to the one he'd made of Nathaniel 2 months earlier. The small wooden figure stood side by side on the mantel, facing outward. After dinner, Nathaniel cleared his throat. I got something to say, he began, voice a little stiff but steady. The children went quiet. Tomorrow, we're going into town. The clerk's got our papers. Claire and I, we're making things official. She'll carry our name. There was a beat of silence. Then Luke asked, like, married? Nathaniel nodded. Yes. Jonah broke into a grin. Do we get cake? Everyone laughed, even Claire. Anna looked at Claire for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took her hand. I already thought of you as my mother. Now it's just everyone else's turn to catch up. Daniel added, "We're better with you here." "That's not changing." Claire smiled, tears in her eyes now. Not from sadness, but from the quiet weight of being seen, being claimed, and not having to run anymore. That night, Nathaniel and Claire sat out on the porch, the stars bright above, the air cold but clear. No words passed between them for a while. Finally, Claire said, "You think we've earned peace?" Nathaniel took her hand. "We didn't earn it. We built it." Claire rested her head on his shoulder. "Then let's keep building." The next morning, the wagon rolled out across the snowy path toward town. Claire sat beside Nathaniel, children bundled in the back, laughter rising behind them like smoke. When the papers were signed and the names written down in permanent ink, no one cried. No one cheered. They just smiled, the kind of smile that comes when a wound finally closes. Claire Rutledge had arrived a widow, thin from loss and quiet from pain. But by the first snow of winter, she was Claire Harper, not just in name, but in heart, in role, in purpose. She was no longer the hired help. She was the mother they had wished for all along. And this time, she was home.